This is Make It Then Tell Everybody. I'm Dan Berry. I asked you on Patreon for questions, things you'd like me to answer. This is a Patreon only exclusive, so nobody else gets to see this apart from people who are supporting the Patreon. Thank you very much. Michael Safranik said, my preference would probably be planning a project, although I'd be happy with whatever you decide. I said, I can talk through the general process from start to finish. And Michael said, I would find that interesting, although they all look like good topics. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I plan a project start to finish. Obviously, this is just the way that I do it. Everyone else is going to have a slightly different method, but this seems to work for me. Number one is have the idea. Sometimes that's easier said than done, obviously. However it is that you have ideas, it might be like a tiny little seed, it might be something grand, something huge. Who knows? Let's find out. I'll stop hitting the microphone and maintain a veneer of professionalism in this, perhaps. So number one, you have the idea, you do it your way. I often try and give myself plenty of opportunities to screw it up a few times as well. I don't want to screw it up by the time I get to actually doing it, so I want to have as many test runs as possible. I try to edit the idea as much as I can. I will work on a rough version, and I fix it only when it doesn't work, and then I do the finished version. If we dig into that a little bit more deeply, generally it's the process goes, I get excited about the idea. The idea is really good and I love this idea. I've fallen in love with it and I want to get married to this idea. It's wonderful. Then I get nervous. I get cold feet. I'm not sure if this is actually going to work. Generally, I'll lose confidence. Then I'll look around and find that everyone else has already done this and they've done it 100 times better than I can. And what's the point? And then I either do it anyway or I do something else. I feel like this is a natural sort of progression in the way that you have ideas, that you will lose confidence, you'll grow in confidence. And I think anyone that says, I had this great idea and it was great start to finish, is probably fooling themselves or you. I don't know. I think that indecision and insecurity are perfectly natural parts of the creative process. So I think that the sooner you get into that idea, the easier it becomes. In terms of giving myself the opportunity to screw it up a few times, number one, I'll write the idea down. That's important. I know other people, if they write it down, it disappears from their head and it's gone forever, so they need to keep it inside their head. Me, I need to capture it somehow. I know that if it just stays in my head, it'll dribble out of my nose while I sleep and then it's gone forever. So I'll write the idea down. I'll read it out loud to myself, usually when there's no one else around. You know that thing where you have this idea in your head for a funny joke, and you think, I'll be really witty and I'll say this thing, and then you say it and you hear it coming out of your mouth and you think, that's not witty at all. I have the same feeling with my ideas, that my brain is blind to how good or bad they are, but my ears are really honest. They're like, my goodness, that sounded absolutely dreadful. Don't do that again. So I'll read it out loud to myself or to someone else who I trust. Generally, just reading it out to myself is enough. I'll draw the exciting parts. I'll get excited about drawing the characters or the environments that they're going to live in for the duration of this story. I find that the idea will develop as I draw it. Again, if it just stays in my head, it is one version. As soon as I start drawing, it opens up so many different areas of potential that I find really delightful. I find that very exciting. It's at this point I'll try out some new tools. Maybe there's a new pen, there's a new brush in Procreate, there's a new process or a color scheme that I want to try out, something wild that I've not done before. This is the perfect time to do it because this is the area where you're giving yourself permission to get it wrong. There's a gale blowing outside. I don't know if you can hear the wind howling through the cabin. You don't really want to try out new tools right where you start a project. For real, because it might go wrong. You don't have familiarity with your tools. It's something I'm going to talk about a little bit later. I'll do a few tests. I'll do a couple of test pages in a couple of different media to see which one works best. Sometimes the thing I think that looks best is an absolute pain to draw. It's a laborious process, and sometimes the thing that I'm excited to draw doesn't do the story justice. So giving it that little test to see if it actually balances out the idea and the artwork. What I'm trying to do as I go through this process of screwing it up a few times is to stop the project from becoming intimidating. Regardless of the size of a project, sometimes the weight of it can be daunting regardless. So I want to try and remove some of that fear from it, if at all possible. When I come to edit the idea, I'll look at all the work that I've done. I'll look at the version I've written down, and I'll ask myself, does it actually make any sense? Can I explain it to somebody else briefly? If you're going to be pitching it, that's a really good idea, because that's essentially what you need to be able to do, is to explain it to someone else. I've generally found that I tend to overwrite, and then in editing I chop stuff out. I take out all the faff and guff that doesn't add to the story, and I'll snip that out. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad idea, it just means that it's not a good fit for this particular project. You know, if it's a good idea, it'll stay a good idea for the next thing that I work on. When I come to drawing out the roughs, what I like to try and do is plan in a way that allows me to be ambitious. I know that I have a tendency, if I'm left unchecked, to just do the most simple, most basic version of this that I possibly can. For whatever reason, I guess I'm lazy or something. But I want to be ambitious. You know, I think that I fall into the trap of relying on the same camera angles or the same, you know, kind of shot compositions. So I try and work as if someone else is going to draw it. I know that it's going to be me eventually that actually has to draw it, but I want it to be me being mean to that person in the future. And when I actually do get to draw it, I can deal with it then. But I think working towards that ambitious version of it early on, the sort of masochistic level of detail that you can put into a rough, we can make that decision later on as to whether or not it is actually a good idea. Within the roughs, I'll try and do all of my thinking at that point. I'll be questioning, you know, why does the character move through this environment in this particular way? What's their body language like? How am I going to pace this particular page? Does this bit need more room to breathe? Does this need to slow down? Do I need to focus in on the very small details and minutiae of the character? I don't want to do all of my thinking when I'm doing the actual artwork, because I want to have enough mental bandwidth to actually do the artwork and do it justice. I think in the roughs, I want to be planning and thinking. I tend to work small and relatively quickly, so all of my roughs are about the size of a credit card, that size. At this point, I'm going to drop in some pictures of my actual roughs so you can see what they look like. This is from my next book with David Gaffney called Rivers, published next year by Top Shelf. So again, you can see that it looks very scrappy. I think it's legible. When I'm planning out these pages, I'm starting with the text. The text is the thing that must be read. I can make the pictures smaller, I can move the pictures around, but the text is an undeniable force on the page. It takes up a definite amount of space, and if you can't read it, then the comic doesn't work. So it's super fundamental to the way that this comic is going to be read. So I build everything around the text. At this point, I'm not aiming to make it beautiful. I'm trying to make it readable. I want it to be legible. I want to be able to send it to David, to Chris at Top Shelf, and say, can you read this? Does this make sense to you? And at that point, if they can read it and go, yes, but the pacing here is wrong, can we pull out on this one? It took, you know, a few minutes to draw rather than a few hours, so I become less attached to that version of it as well, which I think is probably a good thing. This bit, the finished version, this used to be the most exciting bit for me, and now it's just drawing. I've done all of my thinking, all of the heavy lifting's been done. All I need to do now is just draw it. So I have to stick to the plan unless it's obviously broken. You know, if I notice a continuity error that desperately needs correcting, then that's when I'll fix it. Other than that, all I'm trying to do is trust the decisions that I made in the past. You know, that weirdo from a few weeks ago who actually planned this out so sadistically. Now I have to just trust those decisions and get on with it. I have to almost split myself in two. That was the pre-production guy. I'm the production guy. The post-production guy will tidy it up afterwards as well. Essentially, it's just sitting down and getting it done. That's sometimes quite difficult, and I'm sure we'll get into that into the next couple of questions as well. Ellen, or Elin, please tell me if I got that wrong. Ellen? Wow, I'm really looking forward to this. Would also love to hear more about planning projects, maybe about how you keep motivation up when you're working on a longer project. I find that part the most difficult. Amen. Testify. I think that what I'm trying to find is there's an either in this. I'm either trying to find the joy in what I'm doing, the anticipation, the excitement, the fulfillment and satisfaction of sharing something I've worked really, really hard on. That's something fun to cling on to. Like, won't it be great when it's finished? Or I'm trying to think about the alternative, which is what would I much prefer to not be doing? I'm thinking about that petrol station I worked in, or the building site I worked on, or the super stressful university job I had. Like, what is the alternative to doing this fun thing? And when I frame it for myself in those terms, like either the positive or the negative, the thing I do want to do or the thing I don't want to do, it becomes slightly easier to think it through, I think. That seems to work for me, but my hunch is that everyone has to try and find a way of motivating themselves through it. Again, I can only really speak for myself. I think that positive/negative way, depending on what mood I'm in, tends to work. Mishi asks how to do travel comics without it taking over the whole trip. I've managed a sketch diary for a week-long trip once and would love to do it again, but it was huge pressure and time commitment to keep it up every day, even in quite simple form. Do people take photos and work on it back home, or just practice more and it gets faster and easier and better? Thank you. Glad you're back in our ears. Glad to be back, Mishi. Thank you very much. So the question is, how do you do travel comics that aren't all-consuming? I try when I'm traveling and working to focus on being there first and drawing it second. If I'm just there drawing, then I'm not there experiencing, and then it kind of eats its own tail and becomes nothing really. I only work with tools that I am super confident in. I work with one of these Unipin fine liner pens. I have my travel watercolors that I use, and I work with a little aqua brush as well. I usually have a very consistent sketchbook with awful paper in it, so I can't fuss with the watercolor, so it goes down quickly and it stays down. It's very absorbent. It's garbage paper, but it works really, really quickly. The key with knowing your tools is that they're not going to surprise you at all. They've almost got to be fairly boring, so they become invisible and they don't get in the way of you drawing. What I tend to do is I take notes for key events. Usually it's that emotional response to something. How did I feel about this? What did somebody say? What happened? So events. And then for things, I'll take photos. So if it's the pattern on some wall tiles, or the interior of a building, or the look of a railway station or something like that, I'll take photos because my memory's not great for detail. So I'll go back and refer to that. With a lot of travel, I found that there's a great deal of downtime as well, waiting for planes, waiting for trains, sat on benches, just being stationary by and large. So I try and draw in downtimes. I've always woken up really early, so if I wake up at like 5-6 in the morning, I find that I've got an hour or two before anybody else gets up and before anything needs to happen where I can get stuff done. So I tend to draw during those downtimes and then rely on those, the notes and the photographs to back up the info as I go. But then also there is an element of practice, practicing to get quick and practicing to accurately recreate a place or an element or a feeling or a character. Relying on your memory and photographs is good, but there's also that mechanical muscle memory thing that you can train, I think, to get quicker. Danielle Corsetto asks, why were they called cavemen and not cave people? Well, Danielle, the people call themselves cavemen, not cave people, because Stone Age people is too long. The cavemen are also part monkey. Monkey emoji. These are called humanoids. Thank you very much, Danielle, for asking that cutting and insightful question. Classic Danielle Corsetto. What can I say? That's a PowerPoint presentation that my son made on the Stone Age. Danielle and I shared some time in Denmark teaching in Viborg at the animation workshop recently, and my wife sent that to us, and it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. Outside a PowerPoint, he just found it on the iPad and started making PowerPoints, and it's the most joyful thing on the planet. Danielle also says, on a much less serious note, how do you draw straight to inks without penciling and not fuck up the proportions? Excuse the language. Are you picturing the final form/overall shape of the drawing while you're drawing it, or maybe just looking a little bit ahead of the line to anticipate its proximity to the lines you've already drawn? These suggestions are all bullshit. Again, excuse the language. So please just give me the number of whoever you sold your soul to. So the idea is, how do you work straight to ink? For me, it was getting over the idea of it being right, or doing a correct drawing. I think that no one else knows what the drawing was supposed to look like. No one at all. There's a version of the picture that's inside your head that no one else has access to apart from yourself. So when I'm drawing, I do have a plan for what I want it to look like. I have my best intentions. I take that sort of mental image and I sort of project it onto the paper, shooting lasers from my eyes. That's kind of the way I think about it. It's a bit weird, but it seems to work. Then I start drawing, and I realize that I've done it wrong. Like, some line will have gone slightly astray. You know, the nose is turned up in the wrong way. There's an elbow astray, something like that. Something's gone wrong. And so either I've got to make this choice. It's either the plan is wrong or the drawing is wrong. And because no one else is really ever going to get to see the plan, I guess I can change that. The drawing, that's the bit that people are going to see. So that I can change. I can carry on drawing. Did that make sense? Did I get that the right way around? The only thing anyone else will get to see is the drawing and not the plan. Yes, that's right. So I change the plan. So I'll look at what I've drawn and then realize, no, that can't now be what it is. And so I have to then mentally rearrange the elements to get them to fit. Some of this is down to training, so drawing straight in ink and forcing yourself not to rely on the pencil. And also there's a fun game you can play with yourself or a friend that I think I remember seeing Dave Gibbons talk about, called the 5 dots. So on a piece of paper, put 5 random dots. One of those dots is going to be the head, 2 of those dots are going to be hands, and 2 of those dots are going to be feet. And your job is to try and join them up in such a way that you've got a proportioned figure. That's really exciting, and at this point now I'm going to drop in a little bit of footage that I'm going to record in a little bit of me actually demonstrating this. So here it is. So with a nice big piece of paper, I'm going to add 5 dots at random. There we go, in a kind of star configuration. Now part of me thinks that this one should be the head, this one should be a hand, this one should be a hand, that should be a foot, and that should be a foot. And yes, we can do that. We can get some feet in there and some hands in there, a foot there, and a foot there, and yes, we can get this beautiful dancer. If I get in close, it's a dancer. You can tell, very, very happy. We don't necessarily have to do it that way. We don't have to have the top one or the center one, the one with the hands next to it. Although, yes, of course we could. We'll do it again. Let's get a face there. Remember, your hands are anywhere within your range of motion that you can grab. So this one, I feel we can get a butt there. We've got a pointy little foot. We can get that range of motion in there. We got a good fun jumping battle buddy. Try again. I did 10 dots this time. There's 10 here. We could make a super erotic piece of compelling artwork here, or we could have people wrestling, I guess. Also super erotic piece of compelling artwork. Let's have one there, and let's get this guy there. Now I think we can get a hand there and a hand there that I think belong to this guy here, like that. And I think we can get one foot over there, and then another foot. Where can we get another foot? Over here somewhere, probably. The thing is, this is a very fun game. I like this a lot. This is something I'll do on the train to amuse myself. This guy here, I say guy, you don't have to be guys. We can get that in there. We can kind of play with a little bit of foreshortening if we like. There you go. That's me being woken up by my son first thing in the morning, and you can tell because look how unhappy I am, and look how happy he is. I'm being attacked. Also, I'm wearing shoes in bed. What a monster. Good fun. So, also in terms of drawing, I have, Danielle, a hot take for you. Elbows and knees are boring, and they're not as exciting as hands or feet. Live with it. the what people tend to do when they start drawing is they'll start with the head, and then they'll draw down to the neck, and then they'll draw down to the shoulder, and then down to the elbow, and then down to the hand. And each time you draw one of those lines from the head to the neck to the shoulder, the neck to the shoulder to the elbow, elbow to the hand, you cut down the amount of places that your hand can actually be. And if you think about the location of your hands, they can kind of be anywhere and in any way that you can reach. And you can get your hands in, sorry if I hit in the microphone again, into kind of any configuration you like. So it doesn't make sense to focus on the elbows and the knees and the shoulders when they don't have as much emotional attachment to the character, and they don't give, say the placement of the feet, that sense of depth and perspective and scale. So what I tend to do is draw the head and then put the hands into those positions that I know they're going to need to be, and then draw back from the neck to the shoulder and from the hand to the elbow, because your elbows have to follow around your hands. They kind of have to. I can't really move my hands around my body without my shoulders and my elbows moving as well. So it seems weird to give so much power and control to the elbows and the shoulders when it should be coming from the hands. So that's the way I think about it. I draw backwards. And if the hands are in the right kind of position, then you kind of get a better idea of where to put the shoulders, and you can bring them up for a shrug, or you can take them down for a sort of forlorn, or you can change the aspect of the head. These are all exciting bits, and I think letting all those decisions be made by a line that you drew that describes, a shoulder, kind of, I don't like it. So hopefully that clears something up for you. Sarah Sweat says, you have spoken about your process of sketching on the iPad, inking and watercolor on paper.
Sorry.
Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to start this bit again. Sarah Sweat says, you have spoken about your process of sketching on the iPad, inking and watercolor on paper, then cleaning up in Photoshop. How does this happen technically? Can you print from the iPad onto your favorite paper, or is there a light box involved? Generally, yes. Could the last step happen in Procreate instead of with a photo of the inked and watercolor pages instead of scanning? I don't own a scanner, but I'm steering clear of the Adobe monthly bill thing. Amen, aren't we all? So we have just ended up staying in Procreate for all steps of things that will be produced, but like my real ink and watercolor diary work best. So the basic question is, how do we do this hybrid Procreate iPad paper workflow without Photoshop or a scanner? Maybe not even a printer, maybe, possibly. So the short answer is the question is it possible? And I guess the short answer is yes, but. There's always going to be a but there. So in terms of the yes, you can plan it out in Procreate. You can print it and lightbox it onto your favorite paper, scan it in and augment it in Procreate. So we can cut out Photoshop there. But we've said we haven't got a lightbox, or we haven't got a scanner. So in a pinch, what I've done, again, while I've been traveling, I think I did this in Frankfurt Airport. I planned something out in Procreate, and then I took a screen grab of it, and I set that as the lock screen. And then I turned the brightness all the way up and put my paper on top of the iPad screen and kind of drew on top of it. It was a little bit clunky, and I think if I spent a bit more time with it and had some masking tape or something, I could have had something that was quite workable. That was weird. It kind of worked. You got to be careful of the scaling and that sort of parallax tilt sensor motion on there as well, because your picture will scoot around if you're not careful. But if you've also got no scanner, I have also, in a pinch, taken a photo of the artwork that I've drawn, and then taken that into Procreate and cleaned it up. It kind of works. You need to have a really, really good photo of it, a really clear, crisp, flat photo of it. Good, clear, natural light seems to work best, so it doesn't tint. You've got the full, sunlight visible spectrum bouncing off the page. But again, it's very, very difficult to get that super consistent. So if I was doing a page of comics, it's going to be a little bit tough, because I need to get all those panels nice and square to the margins and the edge of the page. It works way better for like single images. So if I've got a picture of, a duck in a fez that I've drawn, for example, I can take a photo of that watercolored little version, take it into Procreate and add like sketches. I can get all sketchy with it. I can add like a shadows layer That's the word I was looking for. I can, do effects. I can put backgrounds. I can isolate the foreground from the background, and all that jazz if I want to. It's a bit clunky, and I understand the desire to get away from the Adobe prison. That would be a very nice prison to escape from. I think the Affinity designers and publishers and all those seem to be doing quite a good job of filling in the gaps between some of those Adobe packages. Be interesting to see how it progresses. I love that Procreate now has CMYK support. That is absolutely wonderful. Very happy about that. My hunch for your process, though, is that it's going to need a little bit of trial and error to get to a workable workaround, but it's not impossible at all. There is hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Just keep going, I guess. Thanks very much for this January Q&A. I've been Dan Berry, and this is Make It Then Tell Everybody. Thanks very much. Tell your friends. Bye.